The manila envelope was sitting on my desk when I walked in that Tuesday morning. No meeting scheduled, no heads up from my assistant. Just this thin rectangle with my name typed across the front like someone had spent way too much time making sure the font was perfect. I'm Michael Garrison, 52 years old, and up until that moment I was the Senior Director of Defense Contracts at Titan Defense Systems. 20 years in this business after my Navy SEAL days, and I thought I knew how things worked around here. The letter inside was brief. Effective immediately, your position has been restructured to strategic consultant, compensation adjusted accordingly. That was corporate speak for you're getting screwed, but we're going to make it sound professional. 59% pay cut, from $485,000 to $200,000, after I'd just closed the biggest deal in company history. You know that feeling when you get sucker punched? Not the physical pain, but that moment when your brain tries to process what just happened. That's where I was sitting, holding this letter, trying to figure out how the hell I went from hero to zero in 3 weeks. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been in a Pentagon briefing room shaking hands with General Morrison over an $85 billion radar defense contract. 18 months of negotiations, flying back and forth to D.C., missing my son Danny's lacrosse games at West Point because I was busy making sure our boys overseas had the best equipment money could buy. This wasn't just another government contract. This was next-generation battlefield radar that could save American lives. The kind of tech that spots incoming mortars before they turn good soldiers into Gold Star families. I'd used every connection I had from my military days, called in favors with guys I'd served with in Afghanistan, spent nights in cheap hotels near the Pentagon because the work mattered. And now Andrew Walsh, our 42-year-old CEO who got his job because his daddy sits on the board, was handing my life's work to his 28-year-old niece, Jessica Brooks, fresh out of Harvard Business School with an MBA and zero real-world experience. I'd trained her myself when she started here 2 years ago, taught her everything I knew about defense contracts, introduced her to my contacts, even let her sit in on classified briefings. She reminded me of Danny at that age, smart, eager, full of ideas but no clue how the real world worked. I'd been like a second father to her after her dad passed away. Hell, she used to call me Uncle Mike when no one was around. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a guy who'd survived 3 deployments and 20 years of corporate politics, getting taken out by family nepotism and a kid I'd mentored. The morning I got that letter, I walked past what used to be my corner office. The nameplate was already gone. Not covered up, not replaced, just gone. Like my 20 years here had been erased overnight. Some intern was moving furniture around inside, setting up a desk that looked like it came from IKEA. My awards were stacked in boxes by the door. The photo of me and Danny at his West Point graduation was face down in a cardboard container marked personal effects. 20 years of my life in a box. Purple heart from Kandahar sitting next to a coffee mug that said world's greatest dad. If that doesn't put things in perspective, nothing will. They'd moved me to the 3rd floor, not even a real office. Just a cubicle in the back corner near the supply closet. The kind of space they give to junior analysts fresh out of college. Gray fabric walls, no windows, fluorescent lights humming overhead like angry wasps. I sat in that cheap rolling chair and looked around. On my left was Steve Martinez from accounting, been here 15 years, probably making $60,000. On my right was some kid whose name I didn't know, looked like he was maybe 25, typing away on spreadsheets. This was my new world. This was what loyalty got you. But here's the thing about being a SEAL. They don't just teach you how to shoot straight and blow things up. They teach you how to think under pressure, how to assess a situation, identify your assets, and find a way to complete the mission even when everything goes sideways. Right now, my mission was simple. Survive this with my dignity intact and figure out how to pay for Danny's education. I opened my laptop and started scrolling through emails. Most of my access had been cut off, but they'd forgotten about my Pentagon correspondence folder. Still had General Morrison's direct line, still had connections with half the Joint Chiefs. Then I found it. Buried in the contract language for the radar deal was something I'd added during the final negotiations. A clause that seemed routine at the time but now looked like a gift from God. Section 12.7. Operational oversight and implementation shall remain under the direct supervision of Michael Garrison. In the event of personnel changes affecting this position, the Department of Defense reserves the right to review and potentially terminate this agreement. I'd put that in there because Morrison specifically asked for it. He'd been burned before by companies that signed deals with experienced guys and then handed the work off to kids who didn't understand the complexities. Mike, he'd told me over beers after the signing, I trust you. I don't trust your company. If they try to sideline you, this whole thing goes away. Now I was sitting in a cubicle watching Jessica move into my office through the glass partition, and I had the nuclear option sitting right there in black and white. The smart move would have been to call Walsh immediately, explain the situation, maybe negotiate my way back into a decent position. But I wasn't feeling particularly smart that day. I was feeling like a man who'd given everything to a company that saw him as disposable. So I closed the laptop, locked it in my desk drawer, and started planning. Danny's call came at 8 p.m. sharp, just like always. My son's nothing if not disciplined. Guess that runs in the family. The ringtone cut through the silence of my empty house like it always did, but tonight it felt different. Tonight I was dreading this conversation. Hey Dad, how'd the big promotion meeting go today? I'd told him about the meeting last week, back when I thought it was actually about recognition for the Pentagon deal. Back when I still believed 20 years of loyalty meant something. Funny how wrong you can be. Change of plans, son. Tell me about your classes instead. He launched into stories about tactical operations and leadership seminars, his voice full of that enthusiasm you only get at 22. I found myself thinking about how proud I was of him. Fourth-generation military in our family. His great-grandfather landed at Normandy. His grandfather flew missions over Vietnam. I'd kicked down doors in the desert. And now Danny was learning to be an officer. But West Point isn't cheap, even with my military benefits. Between tuition, books, and expenses, I was looking at $25,000 a year. Money I'd always been able to handle before. Money that just became a whole lot harder to come by. Dad, you still there? Yeah, sorry. Just thinking about work stuff. Everything okay? You sound different. That's the thing about kids. They always know when something's wrong, even when you're trying to hide it. Everything's fine, Danny. Just some changes at the office, good changes or bad changes. I looked around my kitchen, taking in the mortgage payment sitting on the counter, the bills stacked next to it. We'll see. After we hung up, I sat there staring at a beer I wasn't really drinking. The house felt too quiet. My ex-wife Sarah had taken the dog when she moved to Phoenix 5 years ago, said she needed a fresh start after the divorce. Can't say I blamed her. Military life, then the crazy hours in defense contracting, I wasn't exactly husband of the year, but Danny was my responsibility now, had been since Sarah left, and I'd be damned if I was going to let some spoiled CEO's kid ruin my son's future. The next morning, I went back to my cubicle like nothing had happened, like getting demoted after the biggest success of my career was just another Tuesday. The place felt different now that I wasn't running anything. Smaller, like looking at your old high school and realizing it wasn't nearly as big as you remembered. Jessica was settling into my old office, hanging up some motivational posters about innovation and synergy, corporate buzzwords that don't mean much when you're trying to keep soldiers alive. Through the glass partition, I could see her arranging family photos on what used to be my desk. Around lunch, I got an email from General Morrison's aide. Routine check-in about the radar project timeline. The kind of email I used to handle myself with a quick phone call. Now it was getting forwarded down the chain to someone who'd never worn a uniform. I forwarded it to Jessica with a note. This is yours now. She stopped by my cubicle an hour later, looking nervous. You could tell she was trying to figure out the new dynamic between us. 2 weeks ago, I was her mentor. Now I was just another employee sitting in a cube farm. Michael, Mr. Garrison. She stumbled over what to call me now that the power structure had shifted. I got this email from the Pentagon. General Morrison wants a status update. I was hoping you could handle it since you know him personally. I leaned back in my cheap chair and looked at her. Really looked at her. 2 years ago, she'd been eager to learn, asking smart questions, taking notes on everything I said. Now she was in a $2,000 suit trying to fill shoes that were way too big for her feet. Jessica, you're the director now. You handle it. But I don't have the relationship with, then build one. That's what directors do. Her face fell. I could see she was expecting me to bail her out, to smooth things over like I always had before. But that wasn't my job anymore. That was her problem now. She left looking frustrated, but I wasn't her mentor anymore. I was just another employee, sitting in a cubicle, waiting for my pension to kick in. Except I wasn't waiting. I was watching. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Jessica struggle with emails from Pentagon liaisons who barely knew her name. I watched her schedule meetings with generals who remembered me but had no idea who she was. I watched Walsh parade her around the executive floor like she was some kind of trophy, proof that the company was evolving and embracing fresh perspectives. The radar project was already showing cracks. Implementation delays, communication breakdowns, technical specifications that didn't match what the Pentagon had requested. All problems I could have fixed with a few phone calls to guys I'd served with. Guys who trusted me because we'd been in the sand together. But nobody asked me to fix anything. I was just the old guy in the cubicle, watching the ship start to take on water. Steve Martinez from accounting would stop by sometimes, shaking his head. "This is messed up, Mike. Everybody knows you built this deal. That's how it goes, Steve. Company needs fresh blood. Fresh blood, my ass. They need experience. They need people who know what they're doing." But Steve didn't understand the bigger picture. This wasn't about what the company needed. This was about Walsh making his mark, showing the board that he could shake things up. I was just collateral damage in his little power play. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. General Morrison's voice was calm but direct. "Mike, what the hell is going on over there? I've got some kid named Brooks telling me we need to revise specs we agreed on 6 months ago. Specs that you and I hammered out in person." I was sitting in my truck during lunch break, parked in the far corner of the lot where nobody could see me. "I'm not involved anymore, General. Company restructuring." Long pause. I could hear papers shuffling in the background, probably the contract we'd both signed with such optimism just a few weeks ago. "Mike, you know what our contract says about personnel changes?" "Yes, sir, I do. This was supposed to be your project. You gave me your word that you'd see it through, your personal word." And there it was. The thing that separated military folks from corporate types. When we give our word, it means something. It's not just a handshake deal that gets thrown out when the quarterly numbers look bad, and I would have kept it, sir, but that decision wasn't mine to make. Another pause, longer this time. "I'll be in touch." He hung up, and I knew the clock was ticking. Morrison wasn't the kind of general who made idle threats. If he said he'd be in touch, something was going to happen. I sat there for a few more minutes, watching office workers come and go from the building I'd called home for 2 decades. Most of them had no idea what was coming. They were worried about their quarterly reviews and vacation time, not realizing that their jobs were hanging by a thread held by a 28-year-old who'd never negotiated anything bigger than her student loan payments. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I left work early, told the receptionist I had a dentist appointment, and walked out like I owned the place. Because technically, I still had 2 weeks of vacation time built up, and if they wanted to fire me for using it, they could go ahead and try. I drove home through Virginia traffic, thinking about Danny's phone call the night before. The kid was working his ass off at West Point, believing in all the same things I'd believed in at his age: honor, duty, country. The idea that if you did the right thing and worked hard, good things would happen to you. Maybe it was time he learned that the world doesn't always work that way. My phone buzzed with a text as I pulled into the driveway. "Unknown number. This is Jonah Martinez from General Dynamics. We should talk." I stared at that message for a long moment. Jonah Martinez. I knew that name. We'd worked together back in my Pentagon days before he went private sector. Good guy, solid reputation, the kind of person who didn't waste time on small talk. I called him back immediately. "Mike Garrison, I got your text." "Mike, good to hear your voice. I heard through the grapevine that you might be looking for a change of scenery. Word travels fast. It does when you're talking about someone with your reputation. Look, I'll cut to the chase. We're bidding on the Air Force's next-gen AI defense contract, $950 billion over 10 years. We need someone who understands both the Pentagon and the technology. I was standing in my kitchen now, looking out at the backyard where Danny used to practice lacrosse against the garage door. $950 billion. That's a big number. Biggest contract in Air Force history. And frankly, we need someone who can walk into the Pentagon and have generals take his calls. Someone they trust. What's the position? Executive Vice President, Defense Solutions. $750,000 base, plus equity, full team-building authority. The money was nice, but what caught my attention was the team-building part. I choose my own people? Anyone you want. We poach talent all the time. Half our staff used to work for competitors. Just say the word. I thought about Danny's tuition, about the house payments, about the retirement I'd been planning. Then I thought about Walsh's smug face and Jessica sitting in my office. I need to handle some business here first, I told Jonah. Give me 2 weeks. Take all the time you need. This offer isn't going anywhere. After I hung up, I opened a beer and sat on my back porch. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Not because of the job offer, but because I finally had a plan. The next morning, I was back in my cubicle when chaos erupted on the executive floor. Through the glass partition, I could see Walsh and Jessica huddled with 2 guys from legal, all of them looking like someone had just told them their house was on fire. General Morrison had shown up unannounced. No appointment, no advance warning, just walked into the lobby and asked to see whoever was running the radar project. Poor receptionist probably thought she was being pranked. I watched through the windows as the meeting progressed. Morrison sitting stone-faced across from Walsh, Jessica looking like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The legal guys taking notes frantically, probably trying to figure out if they were about to get sued by the Department of Defense. My phone buzzed with a text. Conference room B now. Morrison. I saved the spreadsheet I'd been pretending to work on, straightened my tie, and walked upstairs like I was heading to my own execution. Except this time, I was the one holding the gun. The general was standing by the window when I walked in, hands clasped behind his back in that military posture you never really lose. He was alone. Sir. Sit down, Mike. He turned around, and I could see he was tired, really tired. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Yes, sir. You know what has to happen here. I know what the contract says, sir. That's not what I'm talking about. Morrison sat across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on the conference table. I've known you for 15 years, Mike. You're not the kind of man who walks away from something he built. Maybe I'm getting too old for this business. Bullshit. His voice was quiet but firm. You're angry. You have every right to be. But those soldiers depending on this radar system don't care about your corporate politics. He was right, and we both knew it. But I'd been pushed too far to back down now. General, what if I told you there was a way to save the project and the jobs of about 200 good people who had nothing to do with this mess? I'd say you've got my attention. I spent the next hour explaining everything. The clause in the contract, Jessica's struggles with implementation, Walsh's power play, the whole ugly situation. Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking a clarifying question. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So you're saying if I invoke Section 12.7, the contract gets terminated and rebid? That's correct, sir. And you just happen to have another job lined up with a company that's likely to win the rebid? General Dynamics has expressed interest in my services, yes, sir. He almost smiled. Almost. Mike, in 30 years of military service, I've learned that sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. The question is, are you sure this is the right thing to do? I thought about Danny at West Point, about Steve Martinez and all the other good people who were going to get hurt when this company collapsed. About Jessica, who'd been thrown into a situation she wasn't ready for. About Walsh, who saw people like me as obstacles to his vision of the future. Sir, I've spent my entire career trying to do the right thing. Sometimes that meant taking a bullet for my team. Sometimes it meant making the hard call when nobody else would. This feels like one of those times. Morrison stood up and extended his hand. Then let's do this right. 2 hours later, I was back in my cubicle when Walsh came storming over with Jessica and the same 2 legal guys from the morning meeting. Half the floor stopped working to watch the show. The Pentagon is terminating our contract, Walsh announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Effective immediately. They're rebidding the project. I looked up from my computer screen, keeping my expression neutral. That's unfortunate. You did this, he said, pointing a finger at me like he was identifying a criminal in a lineup. You sabotaged our biggest contract. I honored a clause that protected our client's interests. If you had kept your commitments, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You're fired, Walsh said. Security will escort you out. Actually, I said, standing up and closing my laptop, I quit. About 2 hours ago. I just hadn't told you yet. The security guard was Martinez. Different Martinez than my accountant friend, but another guy I'd hired personally 3 years earlier. He walked me to the elevator without saying a word, but I could see he was trying not to smile. In the parking lot, he handed me my box of personal effects. Good luck, Mr. Garrison. Place won't be the same without you. Take care of yourself, Rodriguez, and keep your resume updated. Things are about to get interesting around here. The announcement went out that afternoon. General Dynamics had been awarded the emergency interim contract for the radar project, pending a full rebid process. Executive Vice President Michael Garrison would be overseeing the transition to ensure continuity of service. My phone started ringing immediately. Engineers, project managers, analysts, people who'd worked with me for years and suddenly found themselves facing layoffs. By the end of the week, I'd hired 43 of them, the best and brightest from Titan Defense, now working for the competition. Steve Martinez was one of the first to call. "Mike, I heard General Dynamics is hiring. Any chance you need an accountant who knows defense contracts?" "Steve, I need someone to run the financial side of the biggest project in Air Force history. You interested?" "Hell yes, I'm interested." Jessica called me that Saturday morning and I could hear she'd been crying. "Uncle Mike, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen." "I know you didn't, Jess. You got caught up in something bigger than you understood. They fired me yesterday, said I was responsible for losing the contract. My own uncle threw me under the bus to save his job. That hit me harder than I expected." For all the anger I'd felt toward Walsh, Jessica was just a kid who'd been put in an impossible situation. "I'm hiring a new team lead for the AI project," I said. "Someone young, smart, with an MBA and a willingness to learn from people who've been doing this longer. Interested?" The silence stretched for a long moment. "You'd do that? After everything?" "Jess, you made a mistake. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. But this time, you'll be working for someone who actually wants you to succeed." Walsh lasted another month before the board forced him out. Titan Defense laid off 380 people and sold their remaining assets to pay off debts. I heard through the grapevine that he's working for some startup in Silicon Valley now, probably making 1/10 of what his daddy's connections used to earn him. Danny called last week from West Point, excited about his summer assignment. "Dad, they're sending me to work with some general who specifically requested me. Said he knows you." I smiled, looking out the window of my new corner office. In the distance, I could see the Pentagon where American soldiers were getting the radar systems they needed because good people had done the right thing. "Son, always remember, reputation is something you build over decades and destroy in minutes. The people who matter know the difference. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just being exactly who you've always been."